Hello.
I see one, too.
Hey, hi. We're all here.
We're here.
We are here.
Hi.
Hi. How are you doing, Julianne? I'm waiting
Pretty
for
good.
Emily to say something. I just checked
Hi,
in.
I
Hey,
will
Emily.
be I will be on video in about 30 seconds. Sorry.
Okay. I think that's a smart idea then.
Yes, because I want to see you.
Um, what I've got in front of me, Emily, is a series of questions that I developed and it's really what I shared with you, Julianne, is the things that the job description and things that we need to ask you.
Right.
But I'm also looking at your resume, which I think you shared with Emily as well. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep,
Okay.
Yep.
I got it. Thank you.
So you have so much more picturesque living room than I do in my basement, but you're welcome to take a look at what I've got down here. Um, I'm just looking at the questions that I really wanted to start by introducing me, because and then I want Emily to do the same. I've
Sure.
been doing this with this group for about 20 years, um, maybe 19 years, and so I've got sort of one of the longer histories. So when anybody has questions like how do we used to do it? Nobody asked that question, by the way. No one ever asked me that question. But if anyone ever does, I've seen a lot of different things happen over that period of time, and we've grown both the number of programs, the number of students, and number of faculty, and a number of web pages. It's amazing how many web pages we've got. I'm in the midst of consolidating them all so that they bounce down to one website when people go looking for us. But the and Emily knows about this aspect of it. But I think the right now I've got a title. I'm still not exactly sure. I think it's executive director, but that somehow doesn't seem quite right. But I guess I will be the executive director for right now, and I'm doing this for a couple of years, and then we're going to transition to a new leadership model yet to be determined.
Okay.
YTD, but yet to be YTD and we have had a number of people do bookkeeping before, so this is going to be a sort of restarting the process. Emily, and I play cello. I'm a composer. I teach in junior at Composers Institute, and I've got many projects. I've got a project coming up in not in Appleton, Apple Valley, Lakeville. I'm in Lakeville. There's a Lakeville Area Arts Center, and I have a performance there on the 27th. So I'm
Oh,
producing that event, and then it's also streaming and all of that stuff. So Emily, you get to talk now for a little bit.
All right. Hello, I'm Emily.
Hi.
hi.
I have been
Hold on.
involved with junior composers just about as long as Randall.
Yeah, it's true.
Except
That's
I
true.
wasn't full grown when I started. So
Back in
I
the olden
was a
days.
camper.
Back in the olden
I
days.
was a camper from the time I was 12 through probably 19, something like that.
Yeah.
And I did multiple different programs. Back then we didn't have everything we do now, but I am a composer, and I also play piano and violin, and I sing. And so, yeah, I went to camp. It was a huge influence in my musical development. And then I got a piano performance degree from North Dakota State University. I'm here in Grand Forks, North Dakota. So I got my undergrad in Fargo at NDSU. And then I got a master's degree at Bowling Green State University in Ohio, Bowling Green, Ohio. And I finished that in 2016. So currently I work an office job. I actually work for a senator, a U.S. senator, but then I also teach piano lessons. accompany in the community, sing in the community, do a lot of church music, compose when I can. It's been a little sparse. I got married about a year and a half ago, so I'm still figuring out my life in that situation with music and everything together. It's been good, but yeah, so I've been serving on some sort of staff level. Trying to think, I would say probably about 10 years, 11 years, maybe. Originally, I was a composer, or I was a counselor that would come and play for some of the camps. And then I would help all week. I would stay with the kids, help, counsel, play, coach, whatever. And then I became the administrative director. I don't honestly remember how many years, 5-6 years ago.
I don't know how long ago.
It all kind of runs together. I think it was around the time I was in grad school. So that would have been 2014, 15-ish, maybe, something like that.
Okay.
But yeah, so then I continued my administrative director role up until about COVID. And then I still had the title, but then, everything got goofy. We didn't have in-person camps anymore. And so the roles kind of changed, and Randall's taken a lot more of those duties on. We've kind of consolidated some of that into his role. And then right now I am the treasurer on the board. So it's not a paid position, but it's just a sort of a overseer, I guess, assistive kind of role. I think I just started it, so I don't know if I'm describing it correctly or not.
Yeah,
but
you're doing good. You're doing a real good job of that. Because it's a new role, because the staff and the board used to be commingled. And so we're trying to make them separate, that there's an administrative team and then there's a board oversight and partnership with the team. So right now, Emily sees the world from both sides, like Joni Mitchell, from both sides now. But right now, your oversight, that's exactly as you say, your oversight of the administrative team, especially financial management. So that's what we're really reinventing. And so a role that you're going to be playing, if you're doing this, is we're making it up as we go along, which is what composers do. This is what we do. And so it's okay for us to be a little bit fuzzy in the lines of definition, because we're refining this and redefining this. And also because there are business models that can be shown for us so that we can follow. And it's also collaborative models that in the music world, that's also something that we know something about. So we are inventing things as we go forward. So I'm looking at your resume, but I would love to have you say a few things about your experience.
Okay. So yeah, Julianne, and so I graduated with a degree in accounting and music, and then I have done about this much accounting and that much music, kind of, in a way, in terms of vocation, I should say. So my job initially was in cost accounting, very different than a nonprofit situation. But all through the years with church and school, and then I've also operated my own studio with lessons. So, and I'm a singer and piano player. So I teach piano and voice lessons on the side. But in terms of family, we started out in Wisconsin. That's where my big job was. And while I was doing that, our church began a new type of worship, and we were all involved in that. And next thing you know, they were asking me to leave that great job and do the church music full time. They matched my salary. I was, so that's kind of what we did, what I did then. And my husband's a teacher in vocal music. And we did that for a few years. And then he kind of got recruited by where he student taught to move here. And that brought us closer to our families. So we ended up coming here. And then ever since then, I've just been doing the piano and voice lessons out of the home, which was great with small kids at the time. And then we've done a number of directing musicals and plays through the years. And I have, through volunteering at church, I ended up doing something at Hosanna in Lakeville is a really large church. We're not there anymore, but at the time I began a women's ministry that grew to be like over 200 gals that were coming to that. And that was my thing, where they were cutting ministries all the time because of budgets. And I just was like, we can do this self-sustaining, let it keep going. So budgeting and expenses have been kind of my game with all of those things. So through the different plays but that's all general or independent contractor when I come in. So that's freelance work for me. But that's kind of what I've been doing through the years while the kids are growing up. And now we only have one at home and he's 15. And COVID changed a lot of things for us, as you know really well. I've only been teaching by Zoom actually since COVID. My dad has been going through cancer treatments this past year. So we were kind of like, we're not going to, have the kids in and out. And so that's what I've been doing. It's actually worked way better than I thought it could. Not great for a beginner student, so I don't have any beginners anymore. But so I've been doing that, and then the whole world of theater, it's just kind of a grieving thing I'm going through right now too, because it's just so very different. And we've decided we're gonna be done doing that in the schools, and probably maybe do some community summer offerings sometimes, maybe down the road like we used to. But anyway, all that to say is things have changed a lot in the last couple of years. I find myself with a lot more time on my hands, but I don't want to like be booked and, go back into the corporate world or anything like that. So I'm kind of more of a dabbler, and creativity is kind of my thing. So that's why it's always been a part of my life. It's interesting when you say we're composers, so this is how we're rolling, because that's I dabble with that too. We've done a number of things through the years. If you're directing, you're probably adding little scenes here and there, which is kind of what I'm always doing in playwrights too. So anyway, that's me.
How many students are in your studio?
I've only got 12 right now. My number has always been 20, and I've just kind of let the ones who have gone on to college be the end. And unless they have what I'm doing right now is, unless they have piano experience, I'm not taking them on because of the Zoom factor right now.
Right.
Just a little.
It's helpful.
But I'm not doing any more of the school plays, so that's been a huge time commitment for me over the years. And
tell me more about that. What is the theater?
So just in 196, so schools like Rosemount Middle School, Falcon Middle School, mostly those two, and then I do with a homeschool, Twin Cities Homeschool.
Oh, okay. So it's
that
an association of families that have homeschooling. Is that what that is?
Yeah, they have choirs and drama and musicals, and we're trying to have an instrumental, but I think that's been smaller.
Emily, were you homeschooled too?
I was. Yeah. I was homeschooled through 11th grade, and then my senior year I did dual credits because I'm from the Minnesota side, East Grand Forks. My parents live on that side. So yeah, I did the dual credits through the Czech school. So I went to college with 23 credits of generals, and I had a 4-year scholarship anyway. So I was going to go for 4 years, but it made my college experience a lot lighter.
That's what we have done.
Yeah, I felt well prepared, and I always did community music and besides my private lessons. So yeah, awesome. I'm glad that there's a big enough community, a homeschool community in the cities there to do some of that stuff. That's really great, because there's a few things. I had a really big homeschool community at the church. A lot of my friends were homeschooled, and a lot of us did music at a pretty high level, and we would be in the youth orchestras and stuff like that. But when it came to drama, I was in some community theater things when I was like 12, 13, like during the summers and stuff. But and at some point I may not have done it anyway, but I didn't have as many options during the school year because, the school schedule is a lot different than mine.
Yes.
The school schedule. So that's awesome that there's a big enough community there to do that. That's great.
Could you tell Could you tell us about your role in that, in the how that community theater worked and the theater work that you're doing with kids or were doing with kids?
Sure. So what I did, my role in it honestly was directing the cast. So I took care of that. I took care of the costuming and I took care of the light programming. Um, and then I um, accumulated accumulated and kept track of our expenses, you know. So I was kind of the general bookkeeper of that because that's not my husband's
Was
forte.
that like a stage manager trying to keep making sure that you don't spend more money than you got and just
Well,
watching stuff?
well, it depended on which school. I mean,
Oh,
which school I was at. So, or you know, because it's basically the director, or if the school doesn't have a person who wants to do it, then they hire it out.
got it.
So that was my deal, and that's something we used to do back in Wisconsin anyway together
Yeah.
too. So,
So
but
tell me where were the school where's the which schools were using their facilities? That's what was going on.
yes, yeah,
And then they
yeah. So this
contracted
is not.
everybody.
It was not community theater. Honestly, Michael and I ran a bunch of summer camps too, called performing arts, um, applause performing arts camps, and that was through community ed. So
And that's through the
might be
cities
what you're
that
thinking.
that you were in
It'd be
Rosemount.
through the school district also. They publicize it for you, and then you kind of run it.
Name the theater again. I forgot what you said. Performing Arts.
Applause performing arts.
Got it.
Did
There are a
you?
couple.
Oh, sorry.
There's another one with a similar name to that too.
What's that?
I think there's another one called Applause too, but ours was
Oh,
Applause Performing Arts Camps.
camps. Got it. I mean, it's hard not to start duplicating names. I totally understand that. What were you going to ask, Emily?
Were you involved in fundraising for any of those programs, or like the homeschool? Like, how did that work? Did they just pay out, like the families just paid into it and then you worked with that, or?
So the TCHA is, they pay a pretty good, I mean, it's student tuition paid, really. I am sure they get some grants, you know, or some donated funds, but not probably maybe as much so as you guys. For us at school, what we ran into was you don't get a budget hardly at all, and the budget has gotten smaller instead of larger.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
so we began, previous administration allowed us to collect, you know, we would collect an additional fee from the students to cover, like, say, your t-shirts, your pizza party, your things like that. And the previous administration kind of set us up for how to do that. Current administration, they're clamping down on all of that, so much so that
Why is that?
and then the budget kind of just went away. I actually don't really know, unless it's part of the whole STEM, you know, budget constraints. I don't know really, but so it was getting really hard, and I don't know whether it's more about the current administration. There's some struggle there, some real struggle there.
Yeah.
So we're kind of it's a loss.
It's
a loss for us.
the school districts are everything has changed because of COVID. Everything is weird. It's not the same as it used to be.
Yeah.
Talk about how did you get registrations? Were you part of that, or do you have any knowledge about how you were handling registrations with the community? Yeah.
So one of the, you know, with the church Bible study, that was I believe that was the Rock, I think is what they used. That was inbred in the church, and then schools have their own activity fund fee pay sort of thing that they use. I used Seat Yourself for ticket sales. So that was new for us, because when we first started, they were doing things all by paper and selling tickets at the door. And I began like, this is not something I have time to do. So
No.
I opened the Seat Yourself door, and I think then now it'd be something else after that, but that was a game changer.
Yeah, I bet it was.
Yeah. And let's see.
we do registrations now. Kids go to a website and then they fill out a registration form and then they're sent to a portal. So we're talking our numbers are maybe on the upper side 40 over the
Yeah,
course of a year, and I'm thinking that's a fraction of what you were doing with
yeah,
schools.
yeah.
Tell
Our
me about
tickets,
that.
our tickets were more like 300 per evening or per performance.
Hmm.
So it was a lot more than that. I had it set up so that like the credit card fee, the seat yourself portion fee, that all got rolled over to the customer. So we
Yeah,
didn't lose to that,
yeah.
Um, but it was
And
pretty slick, actually. I mean, that's technology's on our side for that.
yeah.
Even to the point of when COVID happened, it actually shut down our Alice in Wonderland. It shut that down on opening night to the public.
Oh
So
God.
we got to do student performances only, and then opening, it was our one of our student performance days. We had to get kids, give them the bad news that they couldn't come back and perform it for their families that evening. And
Wow.
and that, talk about a nightmare. We had a couple times where the one time there was a snowstorm that canceled the show, and one time there was, the COVID and going through the refunds and everything like that. But it was pretty
Yeah.
slick,
Yeah.
honestly, given what it could have been if it
Um,
was.
what about the kids who were signing on to the program? How did you handle that before?
I didn't really have to do anything with that
That
because
was the
that was
school.
through the school.
Got it.
Yeah. And
Got it.
as far as TCHO, they or I think it is, they 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 should do it online. They don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
They're a little behind on some of those things yet.
Yeah. And it's a side thing on the, an extra thing after
Yeah,
beyond the school. Um,
yeah.
well, one of the questions I've got is that we were curious, understanding how that community theater and how you were working with the schools. That was an area that we were just not certain what that was, and it doesn't sound like you were really keeping the books
Oh
for the,
no,
the program.
no.
Got it.
I just handled our. We budgeted to stay inside the expenses and tried to collect enough from students that we never went over because that was. But now they're kind of cracking down on not letting you do that. So
Okay.
unless we do it through community ed, that's a whole different thing. And I think that's what we'll head to instead of doing it through the school.
Could you talk a little bit more about your experience with, I mean, the accounting that I saw on your resume is really a cost analysis is what it seemed like to
Mm-hmm.
me. Is
Mm-hmm.
that is that more
That's right.
accurate?
Yep. Yep. That's
Tell
right.
us tell us what that looked like for you when you were doing that job.
So that job was for a steel manufacturing
Yep. In
company.
Mayfield?
And yeah, and
Mayfield.
we had multiple locations. And really what they needed help with was analyzing how your costs, where your costs are really coming from,
Yeah.
different machines, different parts of the process, and
Sourcing.
how do you collect that data
Yeah. And did they train you
to
in,
the
did they
product.
train you in this? Did Luther train you to do this job, or did you have to get the training in the job?
No, no. I would say, you're told many times in college, you're getting trained, you're getting a degree in this, but you're going to learn it on the job.
Yeah.
A lot of that is very true. And it's hard to understand that when you're in college, but I think that's the way it is with just about anything.
Yeah.
So,
You're getting a degree that's going to get you a job, and then when you get there, you don't know how to do the job. It's not really training you for the job. You have to learn.
yeah,
You have some
yeah,
basics.
yeah.
Have you ever uh, created or adapted or used a chart of accounts before?
I mean, I know what a chart of accounts is. I haven't had to use it really because the things I do with my freelance work, I mean, it's also proprietor, so I
Yeah,
don't have to do that.
that's
You in
right.
a nonprofit kind of are, you're kind of a whole different animal in that you're kind of like that, but it's fund based.
Yes,
And it's easier for you to start to create a chart of accounts. I thought do you have one
we
already?
do. We do have
Okay.
one, and it is way more muscular than we actually need. For what when you look at the chart of accounts, you say, well, this could be a $250,000 business for all of the detail that's there, or more. And we don't I think the biggest budget we've ever had was $40,000
Okay.
in a year. And so the amount of bookkeeping that we have to handle really is consolidated into, I Emily, what would you say? Five months of the year? Four?
Yeah, probably, depending on how many, how much of the koi we continue to do.
Right, right.
But yeah, the majority of the programs we've historically done have always been in July. So,
Yes.
Randall, was the most Composers Online Institute programs, was it two in the 1 year or three?
The koi?
Yeah.
No, there were two in 1 year.
Okay.
And they were that was one in the middle of the year and one in the summer, in the
Okay.
July period of time.
Right.
So going forward, we have a thing called Composers Online Institute. We're not being coy. We're calling it
Okay.
Composers Online Institute, and that can be almost any time of the year, but that's something that can be done and will be done during the school year probably. And it's I'm calling it school year, not that it's only for kids, but it is something that would be done during the regular year as opposed to the summer. And the summer is where we do most of our activities. This coming summer, we're doing an in-person summer camp for girls 9 to 13 in Minneapolis. And then we're doing, and that's only in person. And then we're doing two other camps next to each, one after the other, 1 week after another. And all of these institutes that we run are 1 week long. So the summer institutes are the Junior Composers Institute, and then the studio for film music and gaming music and stuff like that. So they're 1 week after another, and that's not something that the bookkeeper would need to be there, but it's just lets you know that there's registrations that would basically be June for the young girls, and then the other two institutes are at University of Wisconsin River Falls, and that's happening in July. So all of the registrations, we're gonna open registrations right around March 1st, and so all of the registrations are going to start coming in. I'm not going to say all of them. They are going to trail along from March, April, May and June, but they will accumulate speed as we go forward. And I think we're looking at maybe around 40, maybe a little bit more number of registrations. So, and they're different prices, and some of them are in person, and some of them are hybrid, in person and online. So it's they're all 1 week long. I think that's the one thing that's uniform about them. And but most of our registrations would come in the summer. And March 1st is probably a good date, isn't that right, Emily?
Yeah, I think that's around when we've started accepting previously.
Yeah. We've got let me tell you some of the things that we're going to be doing that's new. We're going to be using Quicken, which is new for us. We've been using QuickBooks up to now. Have you used Quicken before?
I use Quicken for my home stuff. So, I mean, that's what I've
used. The answer to that is yes.
I didn't know. I mean, keep going. You were with QuickBooks.
How do you like Quicken?
That's what I know. I like it. I haven't used the online Quicken, so is that what you're using?
Oh yeah, we'll be using online.
Yeah, I just have the software for my own.
And it's exactly looks the same. I have Quicken for myself as well.
Okay.
It works and appears the same thing. What we're going to be looking for Bookkeeper is to help us set up our chart of accounts on Quicken, which we've not done before, and to transfer data. We've got it in QuickBooks. So there's a person who's been working in QuickBooks and is going to prepare the data to be transferred into Quicken, and that'll be helpful. His name is Yuee, Lore, and he will be helpful with that. And he'll get you acquainted with get familiar with the chart of accounts. And I think I talked about that in my note to you. So what I'm recognizing based on what you've talking about is that you use electronics, I mean, Quicken, et cetera,
Mhm.
but it's not something that you are doing in any business relationship.
No, right. No,
That
I just use it to keep track of my own.
and you're doing a studio,
Yeah.
20
Yeah, I do
students.
that, and my own self-employment income is in
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
but
And
I don't have to have
yeah,
all that you
I'm
do.
the same thing. I'm the same thing. I'm a self-employed, what is it? Sole proprietor
Mhm.
for my business. So it's a little bit like this, working with Composer Institute. It's nothing very corporate at all, as you can tell by my
So what's the
surroundings.
move from QuickBooks to Quicken about for you?
Say that again.
Why are you moving out of QuickBooks and into Quicken?
QuickBooks is not as flexible for us to move things. They have things that are sort of templates that you have to work in. It's much more time consuming because they require coding expenses, and it's more powerful, and it's much more powerful than we need. QuickBooks is set up for a small
A
business,
business, a
yeah,
business.
small business of 20 to 50 employees or more.
Yeah.
And we've got just us chickens. We've got a board that needs to have regular reports. So the bookkeeper would be helpful for us to be able. We need a bookkeeper who can be familiar with financial statements. We've got a board member who wants to know how to do P&L statements. Now, P&L statements in a nonprofit, it's only L. We don't have any
Mhm.
P's. We just have L statements. Um, and our budgeting software, if we don't really have budgeting software. That's another thing that QuickBooks does, is it helps you with
Yeah.
budgeting. And right now the budgeting comes down to me doing it, and it's based on past practices. So it's not a very complicated process, and we almost exclusively require depend on registrations to run our business. So
Okay.
it's not, we're not looking at huge amounts of grants. I'm writing a grant now. We get support for scholarships from all sorts of sources, but that's attached to the student. That's not attached to us. So a student wins a scholarship, and then that scholarship is used to pay the registration. So we're basically running a piano studio, but with
Okay.
scholarships.
Okay.
And this,
So it's not like you have great big donors that are
no,
funding. Yeah. Okay.
no. We have
Yeah. So
our,
you're doing basically what we did with, you charge tuition or you charge a
that's
registration fee for our Bible study or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
And then you have to keep track of your expenses accordingly.
yeah. And the board, I think, has yeah, you're absolutely correct. It's not very complicated, and it's not very time consuming, but we have to report to a board. That layer of it is different than, I think, running your own private piano
Mhm.
studio or my own composing business. I just run it for me to I keep my
Right.
records just so I get my taxes done on time and
Yep.
right. And I just know, I know intuitively, well, how much is in the bank?
Mhm.
And so that sort of thing. So what we're looking for is somebody to help us deal with just the bookkeeping, and it's not very much work, but it does require reporting to a board, which means we have to work up some sorts of reports about where we are, what our cash position is, and where our expenses are. And this is very much like what you were talking about, running your summer camps for theater. What are the expenses? What have we gone crazy on, and how are we saving money in other
Mhm.
areas so that we can stay within budget? So it's very similar to what you're talking about.
Mhm.
Um, uh, does that actually jive with
How
what
many
your
board
experience is?
meetings are that? Like, how many times does the board meet?
I would say 4 times in a year, but Emily's been on the board and I have not been on the board for a long time. How many times does the board
That
meet?
that's about right. I think there's one once per year, and usually in October, that's
Yeah.
like our official annual meeting, and that's when we would do more of like actual reports, like more detailed. But the other 2 to 3 times, depending on, with all the new programs we've done lately and COVID and all that, we've called a few board meetings a little bit out of order in terms of our usual timeline, just because people are like, what's going on? What are we doing? Well, how can we help? So,
Yes.
yeah, so I would say 3 for sure, maybe 4, but that one main board meeting is where we used to do it in person. Maybe we will again, where we would all collect ourselves in the Minneapolis area for half a day on a Saturday, and we would have, printed out reports to share. We'd have a little breakfast, whatever, and that would be more of a detailed discussion. The other ones are sort of just check-ins. And actually, I'm trying to remember, Randall, you might remember this for sure, but I think maybe part of the discussion in creating the bookkeeper position and the treasurer position was that there may be times when I would present. I think I'm the one that's going to be presenting reports to the board officially, that you would
Yes.
help prepare them. And
Yeah,
you
I
two
think that's what Pat said.
yeah, the 2 of us would talk about it, but then I would be presenting those. So yeah, the main one is that one in the fall, and then otherwise it would just be a check-in, like how are our balances going? Do we have any big upcoming expenses we need to pay? Is there any injury? Whatever it is, then just checking and making sure. And everybody on the board is just rooting for us. So in my brain, when I think, oh, I have a board meeting, it's like I get a little nervous because I'm kind of used to being, the sole proprietor. I do my thing on the side and
Right.
but they all want us to succeed. Some of them are very detailed, but it's only for the purpose of making sure we don't run into any weird hiccups or problems. So yeah, everybody involved just has been around for a long time, most of them, and really has just, most of them knew me when I was a teenager. So they want our group to just do well and the kids to excel in the program. So that was a long answer, but
No, that was really helpful because there is an oral tradition of who has the memory of these things, and Emily has a lot of the knowledge because she's been with the organization for a long time. You're right. The October board meeting is the one where we actually present here's where we are at the end of the year. We're coming to the end of the calendar year. Here's what our expenses were. Here's our income, and here's the end of the year. And we've actually been lucky, and very much like a piano studio, to have a little bit of set aside for each year. We put that into a kitty, and that has grown over the course of the few years. We've been in business 20 years, and it's about that many thousands of dollars that we've got set aside. So it's our goal is to always end the year in the black, and then put that aside for building up for the coming years. So have you? Emily's doing research on where our bank accounts are. Have you got any recommendations yet? And I'm learning this for the first time. So Emily, what did you find out about banks?
Yeah, so I don't have all my notes right here, but I do know I went to so just for Julianne's benefit, we're currently at BMO Harris. And which I think we just chose that one because that was a bank in the Twin Cities. But the trick is that I don't have any of those branches here in North Dakota, at all. So we're trying to figure out a way to have a bank where both you and I could have physical access to
And
it.
me.
And you, yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
So
You need-
these 3 people in this conversation need to have access to the physical
Right.
bank, but it's also something we should be able to do on the same platform online.
Right. So
Right.
the 2 options that I think were about the only options here in Grand Forks that would also be available for you all would be US Bank and Wells Fargo.
Yeah.
And I visited both of those a couple weeks ago. And so one of the goals in us moving our accounts was both for that physical access and online access, but also potentially if there was an account we could get that would meet our needs, but also have maybe a little bit of return, if we have some money just sitting there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, rates right now on any kind of accounts are really, really bad. So there again, I don't have my sheet right next to me, but there was an account, a type of checking account that would fit what we need and for a nonprofit with relatively few deposits and withdrawals at US Bank that would be the account in general would be well suited for us,
Mhm.
but it's essentially nothing for return.
Almost no return on the.
Basically none, yeah. But
Yeah.
I did appreciate just in going in there. The only time I could go in there was later on a Friday, which I apologize profusely because I hate to do that to people. But the lady, honestly, the lady that helped me, she was extremely kind and helpful. And I'm not super knowledgeable about what's available, so she was really glad to explain to me, very hands on. She had a printout, just it was a very good experience, I would say.
Really,
The
that's great.
Wells Fargo, I went in and the lady was polite, but they don't even have anything tailored. Like we would just be fitting into a general kind of business account.
Yeah.
So there's nothing more tailored to a nonprofit at all. And she also reinforced to me that the rates are just not there for a return on interest or whatever. So just based on those experiences, I'm certainly open to any other ideas. I would be inclined to go with the US Bank option because it's a little bit more hands-on, and just the branch itself is a little, it's more personal. But again, if other folks have different experiences with those two banks and think we should go a different direction, I'm completely open to that. That was just what I had access to here.
Yeah.
And they're well established with like online, like
Yes.
where you can digital deposit
Yep.
things. Yep.
Both of them had good online options in that way. Yep.
That we'll get more. We're going to have to get more granular because I think the bookkeeper is going to have. I mean, is going to have a big role in saying, well, they have more of what we're looking for based on what
Right.
we've learned and talking to each other. So my guess is, and I think this is probably right, there may be a period of time of transition before bookkeeper is up to speed, and you, Laura, is going to help us in that transition. But we're going to have a little bit more conversations at the beginning. We'll set up a set of routines, establishing a routine, saying we need to know something at the end of the month or the third week of the month or where we are right now financially. And I think for 4 or 5 months, that's going to be helpful and very helpful because we're going to need, how are the registrations going? How's that going to affect our expenses? What do we need to trim the sales to make the balance work? So I think for about 3 or 4 months, maybe 5, I'm thinking 4, and then in the 5th month is preparing the end of the year reports, saying here's where we are. This is what damage we did on the expense side and what our benefits were from scholarship money and registrations, and this is where we are at the final point. So I think that's the workflow. Is my understanding is going to be very similar to that. Is that your feeling too, Emily?
Yeah, I think so. And then once we get into that flow, then, we'll be after that point, at that point, 3 to 4 months, assuming all this starts happening sooner, then we'll be in registration time, we'll be in camp time. But yeah, I'm good with that. That sounds like a good plan to
That
me.
sounds just about right. And then there's the report to the board, which I think you're right, Emily. That's your job. And what the bookkeeper and I are doing is preparing the information so that it goes into a report that can be shared digitally with everybody, whether we get together or not, and we pass out paper, or whether we're doing it electronically. It's the same thing. I This is telling you more about the job that we think that's going on. Did you have any questions about what you might be doing if you were doing this job?
So what reporting requirements do you have federally then?
Oh,
Who does
federally,
that?
we have to prepare 1099s for all the people getting paid $600 or
Yep.
more. We have to register with the state. That's something the board takes care of.
Oh, they do. Okay.
But there's a registration with the state for our nonprofit status, and it's an
Right.
annual
Yep.
thing you have to do. We do not have a nonprofit status at this point, so we're going to be we have fiscal agents for any grants that we receive, and I'm writing a grant right now with the Metro Regional Arts Council, and that'll go through a partnership. We are working with a group called the Hopewell Music Cooperative in North Minneapolis, and they're going to be our fiscal agent, and that's also going to be the site of that camp that I was talking about for young girls. So that's 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 going to be changing over the course of a year or two, depending
Wait,
on how
did you say
fast.
you don't have nonprofit
We do
status?
not. We do not. We've
What?
been working under the auspices of the National Federation of Music Clubs, which is a nonprofit in Indiana. We've been doing that for 20 years and
Under them.
under them. And so
Oh,
we have a nonprofit status, but it's not a Minnesota nonprofit. So that has been very complicated and difficult. We've
okay.
had fiscal agents in the last few years, maybe the last 10 years, maybe, for any grants that we receive, and there are very few. But we are moving towards our own nonprofit status, which means there's a whole bunch of other reporting, I'm guessing, that
Yeah.
we have to prepare. And based on my experience, and I've been working in nonprofit, but I've not been doing accounting nonprofit, but I've been working in nonprofits since I was 21. So I'm 68 now, so I should know a lot more, but I know I should know better, but I know some. I know some of the things, and that, Julianne, that's really that's a process that's going to it's going to take about a year and a half or two to do that application to the IRS, and we're changing our name from Junior Composers Institute. Then we changed it to Junior Composers Summer Program, and now it's going to be called Composers Institute. And because it's not just for juniors and it's not just for the summer, so we're moving in that direction, and that's
Okay.
again, we're making that up as we go along. So I'm looking at the time. So that the answer to that question is yes. We have some reporting. It's minimal and it's very official kinds of reporting right now. Because we're not a nonprofit, we're a for-profit in a certain sense, but we use our nonprofit affiliation with the National Federation of Music Clubs in some circumstances. Doesn't really matter for the people who register because we're going to.
Right.
That's not an issue. It's very much like a piano studio.
I have
Okay.
one question, and I'm sorry, I feel silly asking this. I should know this
Don't
answer.
feel
But
silly. No.
okay. When I went to US Bank, she asked me the name of our program, and I said we're a nonprofit because we do have, that
In the
underneath.
state, in the state,
Right,
we're
in
not.
the
We're
state,
counted.
right.
Yeah,
So that
exactly.
was my question because she searched it in Minnesota and
Yeah.
she found us, and then I just got confused. Okay, that makes sense. So we're under the umbrella, and we're not a standalone
We're not a
nonprofit.
standalone. And no, that's a really good question. We have to register in the state of Minnesota, so the business isn't. They clear the name, so
Sure.
there's not two groups as Composers Institute or AAA Auto Repair or
Right.
whatever the thing. So they check the name. They see if there's any legal actions or liens against your business, and that's what that registration does. So it is, and we do register as a nonprofit in Minnesota, but it's not officially a nonprofit in the eyes of the IRS because we
Got it.
haven't been given our nonprofit status yet.
Okay.
That process has started now because we're meeting with Emmett is our consultant who's helping us get that application off the ground. So that's going to take a while.
And also going back to the 1099s, Laura told me that would be my job moving forward. I'm not sure if that's true or not,
No,
but
it's not. No,
it's
it's
not.
not. The bookkeeper and I will know, and this because I'm on the administrative side, not the board side, and it's been confused. What you're
Okay.
experiencing right there is that muddiness that exists between the two things.
Yes.
The administrative team puts together who got paid enough money to warrant a 1099. It's a very easy process of doing the
Yep.
1099s.
Yeah, he had me walk through it with him, and I was happy to do that the last time he did, just a couple weeks ago, and it's super quick and easy. But I wasn't clear on exactly how that would be, so I'm fine either way. I just wasn't sure. So.
Yeah, that's a bookkeeper and administrative director job. That's not, and I've done it many times, so it's not very complicated. No.
Yep.
And the same thing with the state, doing the state renewal of your nonprofit status with the Secretary of State. It's online. It can be done in less than a minute. It's that sort of a process. So, yeah. More questions, Julianne?
They would come up, I'm sure.
Oh yes, we are going to be making this up as we go along because it's a new position, And I listed the job responsibilities as registration is going to take, maybe based on previous years, about 30 hours per year. So that comes pretty much in March through May and maybe even June, but much of it March, April, May. Bookkeeping, we think 5 hours per month at the most, but we aren't going to have much for the bookkeeper to do because we're not really spending money. And then it all comes at the same time. We have probably some expenses in May, and by some I mean 10 transactions, and we might go to 20 in June, and then 50 in July, and then none in August, and none for the rest of the year. It's that kind of a
Okay.
thing. It's not. It happens in the summer, and the transactions are all both incoming and outgoing. We have a card. For the first time, I have now got that card. I have not gone crazy on that card yet. Acapulco is bidding. This cold weather is really getting boring, but I'll stick to it. But we think that when you say what's your bookkeeping, we said 5 hours per month for 6 months. I think it's going to be very few hours in March, and it'll mostly be that transfer of data,
Right.
setting up the chart of accounts, establishing a conversation with the treasurer and the bookkeeper and the administrative director, and then
Figuring out how to generate your reports.
Yep, and then we sort of relax a little bit for April, and things get a little bit more busy. Hold on a second. There we go. They get a little more busy in May, April, May, and then June it gets really busy, and then July we start. I think it's the 11th or the 10th of July, and then it gets real quiet in July, except for the expenses, and then all of the expenses come in July, and then there's nothing in August. So
Okay.
it's that sort of a thing, as far as
So your process of spending and entering a spend, an expenditure,
Mhm.
you are envisioning that you would all have access to Quicken, but you would have a bookkeeper that,
does the entry.
okay,
Does the entry. And you're right, we're going to have an online login that we're going to share with, hold on a second, an online check login for the bookkeeper, the executive director, and the treasurer, and that's it. No one else will have access to it. And there's a way of when you do this online, who logged in, or when did you log in? And it's only a matter, because we're all sharing the same login. These are the times it was logged in, and then we can identify who that person was if we ever have to do go back and track it. So it's and we could
But
have
you're-
more than one person at the same time on Quicken.
but you're really operating more like a spending account through Quicken.
Yeah, and we will be making registration payments through our banking account, and you'll have access to that, and then move those transactions into Quicken.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. That makes sense?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So and the transactions would probably come in at the same timeline we were talking about: April, May, June, July.
And you do it all cash basis. It's no accrual or anything like that.
No.
It's just, yep. So
That's exactly
like
right.
a checking account, really.
It is a checking account,
with
and we have a
accounts.
checking account right now that has thousands of dollars sitting in it and no interest. So we're trying to.
So that bucket of 20 grand, you don't have it separate
Nothing.
somewhere in a different account that can.
That's a great.
Not even like a
bookkeeping
CD or anything like
Nothing.
that, or
Nothing. And it's written on the check. It's a checking account, and so there's no limit on who has access to that money. It's in the checkbook.
Okay.
It's a very large cookie jar, and we would like to separate that out. And even if we're getting 0.5% interest, That's better than 0.0%.
Yeah.
So, and we we're not good fiduciary managers in that way. We need to improve, and that's what we're working on right now. So that's what finding the right bank is really helpful, so that it's something that Emily can have access to, you and I can both have access to. So having something that's going to work for a distance relationship, when you've got somebody in Grand Forks and somebody in what city are you in? Apple Valley?
Oh, me? I'm in the Bermuda Triangle of Apple Valley, Lakeville, Farmington. So yeah, where you're
Okay.
going to have your concert in a week.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I never thought of it as a Bermuda Triangle, but yeah,
It is.
it's Rosemount. It's all of the areas
Yeah.
right in there.
I have an Apple Valley phone number, a Farmington mailing address, but I live in the city of Lakeville. That's what I mean.
I totally get that. Yeah, and I'm in Minneapolis near the University of Minnesota.
Okay.
So we know where that is, but the bridges keep falling down over here. So I know where that is. So I think we're good. What I'd like to do is have a conversation with Pat and Emily separate from our conversation, but I really appreciate your time. Do you have any more questions for us? I want to make sure.
So what is, tell me what you're thinking of pay then.
What, $300 a month?
Okay.
And that we may end up changing that because I think we are talking about $1,700. I think is for the year, is what we were talking about, and $300 a month 5 times, that's $1,500, and we pay $200 for, I'm not sure what that. So it's March, April, May, June, July, and then August maybe, just to get the books ready for the reports that we prepare.
So you're talking of March, April, May, June, July, August, September, sort of thing. You're talking about $300 a month, but it would get to 17.
Yep.
Is that what you're saying? Okay.
That's what I'm saying. That is exactly what I'm saying. So it's basically $300 a month. It's going to be light at the beginning and heavy at the end, but I think that's sort of what we're looking at. That makes sense?
Okay. Yep. And honestly, I think in Quicken you can do quite a lot in terms of those reports.
Oh yes.
Set it up. That's what I do anyway.
Oh yes, it's a very powerful program, considering it's going to cost us $34 or something. It's very, very appropriate and scaled according to our size. It's a good thing. And so I think we are about ready to do this until we found a bookkeeper. I think we're going to be talking to you soon.
Okay.
Okay. Does that sound good to you?
I feel like when you checked at your bank, do they have anything like for starting a new account, even just like a $500 promo? Because I feel like
I need to ask that. I don't bank at US Bank. So
US Bank even.
Okay, yeah, I can do more checking. I wasn't really sure all of the questions to ask. I just had a few that we discussed previously. But yeah, I could definitely ask if there's any kind of little bonus or anything like that to offer.
When you bring in $20,000,
they should give you something.
They say, "Oh, we can give you a baseball mitt or something."
Oh,
honestly, I would play that game in both ballparks. If there were 2 banks, I'd stick that account in another bank that's giving you something, and you can have 2 different banks if you've got.
I agree with that. We have more leverage than we are using, and we should be using it a little bit more effectively. And the issue is what banks were available for Emily. You and I could figure out a bank here locally, but if we're going to have somebody in Grand Forks, are you in Grand Forks or East Grand Forks?
Grand Forks.
Grand Forks. You're on that side of the river? Oh my goodness.
I am.
I think it's appropriate where you're working. You should be doing on that side of the river. But the having something that's going to be common for all 3 of us is really important for us. And where we keep that money, we may end up moving it to an account that is only online. We could be an Ally Bank, which is another online bank we could use as well. And we might get a better rate of return for a large money. But moving money around, making sure it's liquid, making sure that it's working for us as much as we can do, and online and physically if we need to. These are all criteria that we're talking about. And thank you for you doing that work for us, Emily. That's really great. It's really helpful. I'm done. If you got anything else, guys.
It's good.
Yes?
Yep.
Good. I think I'm good to go.
All right, good. I'm going to go. I've got other things. I'll talk to Pat and I might call you a little bit later, Emily.
Okay.
Okay. It's
Good
nice to meet you too.
Julianne.
Yeah.
Nice meeting you,
Bye-bye.
Julianne.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.